Welcome to the deep dive. Get ready, because today we're plunging headfirst into a topic that sits right at that intersection of, who we are and where we're headed.
Yeah, this complex relationship between human desire and technology.
Exactly. And we're looking at a perspective from one source that really pushes back against some common ideas about predictability, how predictable the future of tech really is.
That's right. We've got this article, The Unpredictable Nature of Human Desire and Technology. And it takes a look at some established ideas, specifically mentioning Daniel Miessler, but then offers this counter-argument that's, well, pretty fascinating.
Absolutely. And our goal in this deep dive is really to dig into the core arguments, pull out the insightful examples the source uses. We want to understand why predicting the future, even when we think we know what people want, might be far trickier than it seems.
Yeah, let's see how deep we can go together on this.
Okay.
So the article kicks off by acknowledging a common starting point. Right, this idea attributed to Miesslers that, okay, maybe the technology itself evolves unpredictably.
Right, the specific inventions, the path it takes.
Exactly. But the underlying human desires driving it, those are seen as relatively constant, predictable even.
And that feels right, doesn't it? I mean, basic human needs,
Yes.
safety, connection, wanting to thrive, that seems pretty consistent throughout history.
The source gets that. It acknowledges that feeling. But then, boom, right away, it presents its core counter-argument.
Okay.
It respectfully, but, pretty firmly disagrees with this idea that human desires are predictable in that way. It basically argues that humans are motivations, the way we chase those desires. It's all just too complex, too dynamic.
Too messy for neat frameworks.
Pretty much. You can't just plug it into a formula and predict the outcome.
Okay, that's a big claim. So how does the source back that up? Why isn't human desire predictable enough for forecasting?
Well, the argument is really rooted in history. The source looks back and says, look, history is full of unexpected developments. Things constantly reshape our world in ways nobody saw coming. And prediction attempts often fail, not just because tech changes fast, but because that human element, especially collective human action, is just incredibly dynamic, unpredictable.
And this is where the article brings in that fantastic historical example, right?
Fire. Yes, fire. Think about it. Nearly 1 million years ago, early humans figure out how to make and control fire. What were the immediate goals?
Keeping warm, cooking food, pretty basic stuff.
Sort of predictable desires, right? Sustenance, comfort.
Yeah.
But here's where the source highlights the unpredicted cascade. Fire doesn't just stay a tool for warmth and cooking. It becomes this foundational technology.
Foundational how?
It fuels innovations that let humans travel across continents, eventually even journeys into space. And at the same time, that very same controlled fire becomes this, terrifying tool of destruction and warfare.
Wow. Okay, so the desire for warmth somehow leads down the line to exploring space and building devastating weapons. You couldn't have charted that path.
Not at all. And they point out it gets even more fundamental. Fire actually catalyzes human evolution itself. Again, totally unpredictable for those early humans.
So?
Cooking food allowed our ancestors to get more nutrients, which directly supported the development of bigger brains.
Ah, the brain development link.
Exactly, which then created the capacity for even more unpredictable stuff.
Like medicine, agriculture.
Complex societies, yeah. All these advancements, the source says, were utterly unforeseeable by the folks huddling around that first fire.
So the example really shows how the outcomes, even from simple desires plus technology, are just inherently unpredictable. The ripples spread way beyond the initial goal.
It demonstrates that even with seemingly simple goals, the long-term consequences seen through history are impossible to predict from the starting point.
Okay, so that sets the stage. Technology unpredictable. Humans?
Humans are exponentially more so, as the source puts it.
Right. We have those universal basics, okay?
Yeah.
Safety, success, social belonging, we all share those.
Yeah, we do. And that seems like it should be a basis for prediction, right? Yeah, seems logical.
But the source hammers on the vast variability in how these motivations actually play out, how they manifest. It depends hugely on culture, religion, individual circumstances, available tech.
So the way one group pursues safety could be totally different, even opposite, to another group's approach.
Precisely. And it's this incredible variability, the source argues, that makes it nearly impossible to predict how collective desires will actually shape technology's path. We all want safety, sure, but does that lead to walls or surveillance tech or space lasers? You can't know for sure.
And there's another great historical example for this point, isn't there? China and the Mongols.
Oh yeah, this one really drives it home.
No.
Two very different approaches to the exact same goal. Safety. Medieval world.
Both absolutely driven by that fundamental need for security.
Absolutely. So China's response, as the source lays it out, monumental, the Great Wall.
An incredible feat of engineering.
Yeah.
Pure defense, keep threats out.
It's a symbol of fortification, yeah. Isolation for security.
And the Mongols, totally different strategy. Same desire for safety, but they pursued it through expansion. They invested in a powerful military, aiming to eliminate threats by conquering them.
Wow.
Their empire building just reshaped huge parts of the world. Force, cultural exchange, the works.
So same universal human desire safety, but it leads these two powerful groups down completely opposite paths. Building walls versus conquering neighbors, massively different outcomes.
It just underscores the source's point perfectly. The unpredictability isn't just in the tech itself. It's deep in human decision-making, collective action, even when the driver is universal.
Okay, let's bring this into the modern world then. How does the source apply this thinking to something like digital assistants?
It does, yeah. References that vision you often hear, maybe like Miesslers, where DAs become these deeply integrated, almost all-knowing companions.
Indispensable, independent, user-controlled.
Right, that sort of sci-fi ideal. Your personal AI, totally loyal, totally under your command. But the source offers a counter-perspective. It argues that vision, especially the independent user-controlled bit, seems unlikely given where things are actually heading.
Unlikely. But they also say it's already a reality in some ways. How does that work?
Well, the reality part is about the integration. The article points to our smartphones right now as incredibly advanced digital assistants. They already know way more about us than we probably realize.
Okay. How so? What are the examples?
They're use-specific ones, yeah, things that might feel a bit unnerving, like the uncanny accuracy of targeted ads.
Oh yeah, mention something out loud.
And suddenly you're seeing ads for it everywhere. The source says, this shows how our devices constantly collect and analyze data preferences, habits, interactions.
And things like YouTube or Netflix recommending stuff with scary precision.
Exactly. The source argues these show DAs are already deeply embedded, constantly processing info about us. But here's the twist.
The twist is why they won't become truly independent.
Right. The source argues they are more likely to remain tethered to centralized systems managed by tech giants. Google, Apple, Amazon, the ones controlling the platforms and the data.
Ah, the centralization argument.
Yeah, and they draw parallels to support this. Think about cloud computing data and processing power aren't really on your device anymore. They're in huge centralized server farms.
Or cars. Modern cars are becoming part of these interconnected networks, right? Relying on central systems for self-driving updates, tracking data.
Exactly. So given these powerful trends towards centralizing data and processing, the source concludes it's improbable that DAs will become those standalone independent agents loyal only to the user.
They'll likely stay extensions of these big corporate ecosystems.
That seems to be the argument, yeah.
Okay, this leads us nicely into the part where the article directly critiques some specific AI predictions, contrasting them with Miesler's points sometimes.
Right. Tackling a few misconceptions about AI predictions. First one.
Yeah.
Everything and everyone gets an API. This idea of a daemon or aura.
Explain that API idea again quickly.
Sure. An API, application programming interface, is basically just a standard way for different software systems to talk to each other, share data. The idea here is every service, maybe even every person gets one for seamless interaction.
Okay, universal connectivity.
But the source pushes back. Says it seems unlikely given the current trajectory of AI development. Why? Because the barriers to entry for top-tier AI are so high.
Meaning only a few big players can really build the cutting-edge stuff.
Exactly. So you get concentration, a few dominant companies controlling the core AI infrastructure.
And how does that centralization affect the API for everything dream?
Well, the source argues it reduces the need for that sprawling, decentralized network. If most of the important data and processing power live inside a few huge systems, Google's, Amazon's, etc., interactions will happen within those systems, not across millions of tiny independent APIs.
The data pools are centralized, so the interaction's centralized too. Makes sense. Okay, prediction 2. RDAs will mediate everything.
On this one, the source is kind of like, well, yeah. They see it less as a future prediction and more as just an observation about right now.
It's already happening.
Pretty much. They use Apple Maps as an example. It already learns your routine, right? Proactively tells you when to leave for work based on traffic.
Yeah, my phone does that. Knows my commute. suggests roots.
Exactly. The source's point is this isn't some sci-fi glimpse into the future. It's just a logical extension of existing technology that's already weaving itself into our lives, mediating how we interact with information and the world.
Okay, less prediction, more description of the present. Got it. Finally, prediction 3. Our DAs will become advocates and defenders, your AI pal protecting you.
Yeah, the idea that your digital assistant will act as your digital bodyguard or advocate. The source makes this interesting comparison.
The Second Amendment one.
Right. Echoes the ideal of the right to bear arms for self-defense, but in the digital world.
Provocative. So what's the counter-argument from the source?
They argue basically that just as gun ownership doesn't guarantee safety, there is no assurance that digital assistants will effectively protect their users.
Why not? What's the catch?
They point to the potential for intervention by powerful external forces, governments or even the corporations controlling the DA's underlying system. If those powers see the DA's owner as a threat, or if corporate interests conflict, they could potentially limit the DA's ability to truly advocate for or defend its user against that power. The leash is held by someone else.
Right, the centralized control again. So bringing us full circle back to the main theme. The source really doubles down on this view that using predictable human desires to predict tech outcomes. It just oversimplifies the complexity.
Exactly. It repeats that desires aren't fixed, they aren't uniform, they're shaped and expressed in countless ways by culture, religion, personal history, the tools we have, all that stuff.
And even those universal motivations, safety, success.
The way people pursue them varies so wildly that any certainty about predicting the specific outcomes of tech built for those desires is, well, fundamentally impossible, according to this view.
Just like the fire example again, basic desire, warmth, cooking, leads to
Metallurgy, civilizations, environmental damage, modern warfare, a single desire sparking a future nobody could have predicted at the start.
Okay, so summing up this deep dive, the main takeaway from this source is really a strong challenge to optimism about predictability, especially when it's based on supposedly constant human wants.
Yeah, the source makes a compelling case that humans, our motivations, and therefore the future of the technology we create, are just inherently complex, dynamic, and ultimately unpredictable.
We've seen how basic desires led down wildly different historical paths, like with China and the Mongols, and how modern tech, like digital assistants, seems to be trending towards centralization, not independence, challenging some of those common AI predictions.
Right. It paints a picture less of a predictable march forward and more of a complex, branching evolution.
And the article ends with this really interesting thought, doesn't it? It suggests maybe this unpredictability, maybe it isn't a flaw, maybe it's not something to be engineered out.
Yeah, perhaps it's actually a feature, a testament to the boundless creativity, the complexity, the dynamism that makes us human.
So the final thought for you, the listener, what does that idea stir up for you? Thinking of unpredictability not as a bug, but a feature of humanity and its creations. What possibilities does embracing that inherent unpredictability open up in how you think about the future? Something to mull over.